to this great nation of ours. Now, that should actually be the proper segue into our next panel topic. This topic is on how should our current president, this is our new president, President Ruto, Dr. William Ruto, His Excellency, how should his administration nurture and commercialize sports in Kenya with a focus on sports tourism. We have a panel that consists of Mr. WAMALWA MACHIO. He is the founding director of Michezo Africa Limited and Michezo Africa Foundation. He is passionate about nurturing talent and development and has been involved in various community programs. And he is an alumnus of the International Sports Leadership School, South Africa. He's also the founder of Mashariki Sports Leadership School, founding chairman, Magharibi Michezo Awards. We're also joined by Mr. Elias Makori. He is a veteran journalist, currently the managing editor for sports at the Nation Media Group. And in fact, he was named 2012 World Journalist of the Year at World Athletics Centenary Celebrations in Barcelona. He's the first and only African journalist so far to win this award, and he has been named Kenya Sports Journalist of the Year 3 times in 2000, 2014, and 2022. We also have Mr. WILFRED Bungei, and he's a graduate of Brighton University in the United Kingdom. He's a sports analyst and 2008 Olympics champion, where he was the Team Kenya captain. Karibuni, welcome to the session on how should President Ruto's administration nurture and commercialize sports in Kenya with a focus on sports tourism. And our moderator is Mr. BENARD OTIENO, and he is a broadcast professional with over 3 decades of experience on radio and television. He has a special interest in sports broadcasting that has seen him cover the world's premier sporting events around the globe as a TV commentator, and he has been a top presenter and TV analyst for stations including Nation Media Group and K24. He was the lead commentator for East Africa for the pay TV channel Super Sport. He's also host of KTN Late Night Sports Show, Scoreboard. Karibuni.
Thank you very much, Chris. I believe that introduction just says exactly what is going on. I'm glad to see a couple of my seniors here, Elias Makori, with whom I have worked at the Nation Media Group when I was also the head of sports in the broadcast division, and he was in the newspaper division. I'm happy to meet Mr. Machio as well of Michezo Africa and Magharibi Michezo Awards. El Capitano, WILFRED Bungei, the former Olympian 800 meters champion, is also well known to me. And of course, Chris, I do know you very well as well in this world that we are in, the world of media and the world of creatives. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time for this. It's very important that we know whether we should have a national conversation on sports or not. And I think for us to get into the conversation proper, we need to know exactly where are we before we even know what the president, and I think the topic is specific to the president, not even the government, but he said what the president should do to nurture sports in the country and also for sports tourism. I would like to ask just for maybe 1 or 2 lines on where we think we are at the moment, and I will start with the journalist Elias Makori to paint a picture for us in short. And then Mr. Machio can also give us what he thinks is the situation we are in at the moment. As a person who's the founder of Michezo Africa, there must be a void that he saw that enabled him to build that. And also the Magharibi Michezo Awards that are becoming very popular as well. And then we'll follow that with the athlete WILFRED Bungei, who he himself has been on the tracks. He knows what it feels like, and he knows exactly where we are at the moment, especially with a bias to athletics. Elias, thank you very much for joining us. What is your comment on where Kenya is at the moment in terms of sports?
Thanks, Bernard, and good to see our legend WILFRED and Mr. Machio on board. Well, I'd summarize it as follows. We are in the ICU. We are on life support, and we are actually not out of danger. So the struggle is now to get the machines off, get into the HDU, and into the general ward. So the new cabinet secretary, Honorable Babu Namwamba, finds himself waiting to see if this patient will be out of the ICU. In terms of funding, funding for sports is nothing to write home about. In terms of infrastructure, there is zero infrastructure. And a good example to demonstrate that we don't have any infrastructure worth talking about is the fact that World Athletics decided to give Tokyo the hosting rights for 2025 Senior World Championship. And President Sebco said, and he put it plainly, that hey, look here, Kenya might have the passion, Kenya might have the athletes, but you guys don't have the facilities. Nyayo National Stadium, Kasarani, these are outdated stadiums. They are good enough for junior championships and for maybe inter-county and village competitions, but they cannot host a senior world championship. They cannot host the Africa Cup of Nations as it were, even after the renovations. Nyayo and Kasarani are classified by CAF as not good enough to host, international competition. So we're in a critical position where we need to develop our infrastructure. We need to increase funding for sports, and then the usual other things, fighting against doping, fighting corruption. So yeah, Bernard, life support, ICU.
Thank you very much, Elias. I hear you. I also hear a very big bias in terms of athletics when you're talking about the infrastructure and also the recent stance that was adopted by international athletics that is actually threatening to ban the country because of the doping issues that are beleaguering the country. But I hear you. Machio, you probably have been a little bit more in football as well. What's your comment regarding where we are as a country in terms of sports? The topic was generally for sports, but we can also handle the specifics depending on where you feel most comfortable to comment on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bernard. It's an honor for me to be here in the company of Elias and Bungei. I think Elias has painted the picture so well that we are in the ICU, but in the coaching terminologies, basically, if your team is performing so poorly, we always say it's back to basics. So for me, this new government actually is headed back to basics. What are the basics that we need to do in infrastructure? What are the basics that we need to do for myself and Miches? We have been involved a lot in infrastructure and talent development at the lowest level. What is it that we need to do at developing talent? What is it that we need to do, as we have just watched the film, in sports education for our sportsmen and women, in terms of just them knowing the financial literacy, how to manage what they earn, how to invest. What is it that we need to do in terms of policy change? For example, the government, when you go to Vision 2030, I think the sports has been delegated to social pillar of the Vision 2030. So how do we go back and be able to reset this so that we are able to be at par with the rest of the world? When it comes to federation, how do we ensure that the financial prudency of managing federations is there, transparency, good leadership has been invested. So they are made of things that once the opportunity that we have with the new minister and the new president is actually just to press that reset button and be able to go to the basics. And for me, the conversation is what are the basics? Where do we start from and where do we head in comparison to what is being done across the world?
Well, thank you very much, Machio. But having said that as well, Michezo Africa seems to be using just the existing infrastructure well enough to be able to impart the basics to the young people. Where is it that you need it then to be tweaked to be able to produce what we want as a country?
I think Bungei and Elias will tell you, one of the things that I think way back when I had an opportunity to visit a training, it was not a training camp, somewhere in Kaptagat, and we were doing a training for athletes coaches, and I had a friend of mine from Germany who has gone on to establish a sports camp in Kaptagat. We realized that the basic education just in athletics, even if we are, and for me, this is where there is a lot of overlap in government, where several departments or parastatals have been mandated to do the same thing. And the federation is mandated to do the same thing. So for me, it's the convergence of these many organizations into one, so that the training of personnel is actually uniformed, whether that is done through the Olympic Committee or whether that is done through the Kenya National Sport. We need to have a central point where we say, hey, this is the direction we want to go in soccer. This is the direction we want to go. Because a lot of this, including doping, is just something that we need to nurture from the grassroots, so that the information and that needs to go to these athletes actually started at a very, very basic level so that everybody knows this is what it's going to do. In high schools, in primary schools, with CBC now, the emphasis is in talent development. And you realize that these things are being done by very many players in the field. So that is the vacuum that we found, and we have been able to utilize that on our own, and we believe that it's just a drop in the ocean. But if we have that collective networking and collective partnership, I think we will go a little bit much more further.
Well, thank you, Machio. You're almost going into the part of the mitigations that we should put into place. We'll come to that in just one while. WILFRED Bungei is a former Olympian, 800 meters champion. He's got athletics at his heart as well. WILFRED, what do you think is the problem at the moment in Kenya that would warrant a national conversation that would involve the President of the Republic of Kenya in order to find out how to commercialize sports in Kenya? What is the problem? Where are we at the moment?
I think on my end is that the two gentlemen, that is Chris and Elias, have just put it so clearly in terms of where we are in the sport. You see, for a very long time, and especially someone like me who was an active athlete, right now retired, everything that is happening, we are not happy because we see in football, for example, we already have the country being banned. In athletics, we are in the verge of being striked out of athletics. And I can tell you that it takes a government that is responsible to realize that, things are not working as it is supposed to be. First and foremost, I hope that this government will bring all the stakeholders. And what I mean by stakeholders means federations, the sportsmen themselves, and anyone who loves the media, anyone who loves sport in this country. We should be able to have a conversation that we ask ourselves, what is the way forward for athletics for the sport in this country? Because remember this, there's something that I've always advocated for. I've asked anyone who cares about sport that it's only in Kenya that we find the Ministry of Sports is what we call the leanest ministry. You wonder that if this country would be doing more sport, what are we going to experience? First and foremost, we will have a health nation. It means we will invest less in healthcare. And that is why it is high time that we find that we invest more in the sport. We invest more on the young people, because we know that there are so many young people who are upcoming, they want to do sport. And that one of the things that we have seen in this country, the only thing that we are known is athletics. But otherwise, there is immense talent out there. As all of us, we have gone around the country and see people doing different sports. But unfortunately, when it comes to funding, and this one is not only on the national government, but at the same time when it comes to county governments as well. We have all the ministries, every county have Ministry of Sports. What do they do? What kind of funding do they have? And even if they have any funding, is there anything tangible that we can be able to show and say, you know what, this ministry has done this on the sport? And I think this is where the conversation needs to start. And I'm happy to be joined, by the two gentlemen, that is Chris and Elias, and yourself, Bernard, that you have covered sport in this country for a long time. I believe that, moving forward, you're not happy with what is going on. All of us, we must play a role.
Oh, thank you, Bungei. I'm being caught in this in between wanting to be on one side or the other, because I hear all of us blaming the government for not putting things in place. But Elias and I know as well that there is something we like calling government interference in sport, and that is why, for example, the football at the moment is banned, and we can't do much until it is unbanned. Where do we draw the line then between what we want the government to do and what we don't want the government to do? Is there anything like positive government interference that the world bodies that govern sports would be able to accept? Elias, let me start with you. Is it the government? Is it the federations? Or where do we draw the line between what the government should do and what the federations should do for sport?
Actually, in my opinion, it's the government is shooting itself in the foot. Why I say this is because in any serious government and the civilized world, no government gives money, gives handouts to sport. What we see in Kenya is we have the Sports Arts and Social Development Fund, where people, from national teams to Gor Mahia, Leopards, individuals, go to beg for money. They go to get handouts from the government. That shouldn't be happening. And that's where, Kenyan football finds itself, because the government says, look here, as much as we respect FIFA's, rules and regulations that there should be no government interference, but we have every right, because we are giving money. The sports fund has been giving money to FKF, and they have every right to question the use of this money, because they are answerable to the taxpayers. That therein lies the problem, because if the government was not giving this money, then the situation wouldn't have arisen. What should be happening is that the government should create an enabling environment for sports to thrive by putting in place, right from legislation to an environment that will encourage sports funding. We should see tax holidays given to people who support sports, for example. We should see the government developing infrastructure that will help sports to grow. It's not up to the federations to develop or to build stadiums. The government can play that role. It's a responsibility that they have. But the moment they start giving out money, dishing out money, then that's where the friction, comes, because they can't just sit back and give money and not question how it was used. But they need to create that ecosystem for sports to thrive. We need to have a funding mechanism like we see in Europe, something like, we've always talked about the sports lottery, where the money can now, come in and go to sport. That's where we should be heading to, not people lining up at the Ministry of Sports headquarters looking for checks. Even clubs like Gor Mahia, which will have their own stadiums, they should have their own sponsorship. Sponsors, they should be self-financing and not relying on government. I think that is the biggest problem we have. And again, Bernard, we are in a country where sports is not a priority. I say this because we have a serious situation of drought at the moment. For example, we have our health system is almost collapsing. We need the treasury to finance security. So these priorities, if you line them up at the exchequer, sports will be at the bottom of the pecking order. So there we should not be relying on the government to give money, but to create an ecosystem that will allow sports organizations to self-finance.
Okay, thank you very much, Elias. This is looking like a situation where, the left hand needs the right hand, which needs the head, which needs the legs, which needs the body. They are all attached to each other, and that it is not at the moment in very good coordination, because the clubs will ask for money because they are unable to generate their own money, and in which case we should ask them, why are they not generating their own money? I think Machio touched on this a little bit in terms of the policies, and that's what Elias has also touched on again. What level of policies need to be put in place to be able to make sure that the clubs are thriving, or that they are able to raise their own funding? Let me take you back a little bit, gentlemen. If you remember, there's a time in which companies were sponsoring sports, and there were very many of them. They were even fighting to be able to give sponsorships. I'm talking about the good old days. I'm not talking about the last, 5, 6, 10 years. I'm talking about previously. But then this was stopped, and there is a point at which the finance bill was brought in, which again, it looked like it was giving a little bit of a leeway to companies to not be taxed if they are sponsoring sports. Now, is this the kind of policy, Mr. Machio, that you're looking at, or is there something else that you think the government should do to be able to support sports?
Elias has actually touched on it. So first, for example, you asked about the government interference in sport. For me, it is a catch-22 situation, because the government is the biggest investor in sport, and government is actually utilizing public money. So they need to get that accountability of the money they're giving. For me, it's only that the way they go around it is the wrong way, just as I said, it's shooting ourselves in the foot. So the first thing we should do is establish how do we ensure that the money that has been dispersed to federations is accountable. So we can use the already established institutions without going to have to disband federations. So if we have dispersed money to a federation, let's have the Kenya, the Auditor General do their job Let's have all the investigative arm do their job so that whoever is caught culpable is culpable as an individual and not an institution. So for me, that will be the way, one of the policy changes that we go, so that we don't have to keep on disbanding. So when you take over the helm of a federation, you know the chief accounting officer, and if anything happens, I'm accountable to it as an individual. So that is policy change number one. Number two, I think other countries like in the UK and other places, this national lottery has 100 billion or 200 billion. The best lending for any federation or any Olympic sport will be 10 million. So every federation knows at the beginning of any financial year, they have 10 million shillings, so that we don't have to have this a habit of going to beg. So you have 10 million. Then the next allocation will be probably on the popularity of the sport, the performance of the sport, the development budget that has been given, so that there's a specific allocation of money that it goes to federations, known and publicly declared, so that even the public can know the Kenya Football Federation will get 500 million this year. Then it will be easier for us, even in the journalists and stuff, to question how that money has been spent. So that can be policy change number two. Policy change number three is to set up something we call a sport, as Elias spoke about. Who is advising them on what is needed? We talk about what can the president do. You know, a stadium is not just a structure, as Elias put it. There are so many things that go into a stadium. Hospitality industry is one part of a stadium. When you look at most of the private teams that do well, if you look at the hospitality sector, it is one that actually fuels people going into the stadium. For us here, you go to Kasarani in a major stadium, I mean, the hospitality industry is more non-existent. You will get, of course, the occasionally guys who will say you Njugu and they will say you know those stuff, but you need to have so we need to have a consortium where we meet 4 times a year. The consortium will be involving all sports county secretaries, the Ministry of Sport. We have got people from the Federation, as Bungei says it. We have got actors in the hospitality industry, whether it is Nyayo Stadium, do we have a hotel, do we have people who are willing to invest in setting up a 3-4-star hotel that will be able to serve us when we go to the stadiums, so that we can enjoy ourselves. So there are a number of things that we are able to do this. Policy number 4, and then probably I can let Bungei do it, is, for example, the national teams, when they're accessing the national stadiums, they have to pay. This is something that, I mean, the stadium has been put up by public money. The national team is representing the nation. So why should we? So we need to be able to say, okay, this is the amount of money that we will be able to access. The national team should give their calendar so that they are booked and prioritized for the national teams to use. And then probably, since they have been allocated a budget by the national government, then it will be easier for us to be able to get that going. So those are just some of the policies that the government needs to do, and some of them that don't need to have any financial implications to it.
And Bernard, before Bungei chips in, let me just write on what Machio has said. Very, very important issue regarding the counties. We have county governments in place, for several years now, but there's no coordination with the national federations. For example, look at the running track at Kericho Stadium, a new tartan track built without consultation with Athletics Kenya, with the IAAF or World Athletics Regional Development Center in Nairobi. It ends up being substandard. Football fields are constructed by counties which don't measure to FIFA standards. So really it behoves the county, the Council of Governors Sports Committee. They always have sports committees, but you don't see what they do. They recently had the elections, appointed a new chairman of the sports committee for governors, but they don't look at the basics. There are people who should be consulted before stadiums are constructed so that they measure up to the international standards. And I'm sure Wilfred will agree. I'm sure what is happening in Kapsabet, for example, where you come from, there's no consultation with Ibrahim Hussein, who is the World Athletics Regional Development Center manager, who is competent to give the measurements that are allowed, it ends up being that you have a big stadium, but it cannot host any international competition, or if a race is run, the race will not be recognized as official, the way we saw in Abuja during the Africa Championships, where the track, the competition was substandard, an African Championship where Kenya qualifies for the World Championship, and they're told, hey, look here, stadium is substandard, those timings are not recognized.
So, gentlemen, we seem to be having a little bit of a problem that is amorphous. Just a moment, Bungei. I was just reacting to what Machio had said earlier. We seem to have an amorphous problem. And I'm also, I'll put it to you so that we can talk about this, on whether or not, Machio, you think then it should be a private-public partnership, because talking about a consortium that can do these things and that can also be consulted means forming something else outside government that can give advice to government on what should be done in sport. Now, also talking about the counties and the county allocations, again, is being negated by what Elias is saying, that the counties have an allocation, but they are putting it in substandard work. I don't know who is supposed to correct that as well. So we'll come back to discuss that. Let me hear now Bungei's contribution about what then constitutes policies that can be encouraging to sports development. What do you think?
Bernard, let me, before even I mentioned that, there is something that both Chris and Elias has mentioned, and I think I want to pick about Kapsabet Stadium. You know, it's one of the ones that was done, I think, in the budget of 2013, 2017. Until now, nothing has been done, despite the fact that, you know, we are being told hundreds of millions has been spent, completely zero. You know, there is nothing that is going on there. And this is where we have a problem, as Elias has put it, you have put it yourself, that, you know, we have put county government, you know, what are they doing? You know, when they have these guys who are being appointed as CECs and the CEOs, what exactly, do they have a benchmark that they would say, this year we had certain budget, you know, this was what we had planned to do, did we achieve it? And then when it comes to also successive governments, I believe that, you know, if there's a project that was started, it should be able to bring to completion rather than leaving it and then, you know, you come and start again. This is a situation that the national government, and as the topic is, we are talking about what is the president supposed to do. These are things that they should be able to look at, you know, go back, look at those projects that was touching on sport, it has stalled. They should be able to do something. Now, there's something very important that you mentioned, Bernard, about the old days, you know, where you have companies that come in and they want to sponsor an event, they want to be part of football or anything or athletics. Currently, you know, we don't have, but I want to say this is a challenge now to the federations. I've had the privilege of meeting so many CEOs of companies, and they are telling me, Wilfred, you know, we want to participate in sports, but we don't know how. I believe that one of the challenges that we have at the moment is that, you know, the federations themselves cannot go to companies and say, you know what, we need you to sponsor us on ABCD. KEPSA, for example, Kenya Private Sector Association. Many of those CEOs, you know, they are willing and ready, you know, to work. Look, for example, what Isuzu is doing with Elliot. This is the only company that has identified one athlete. But I believe many companies, they want to participate, but they don't know, they have no knowledge. Now, there's something else that I wanted to mention, that I don't know if the Kenyan government and anyone who loves sport understand the reason why we did not host the 2025 World Championships. It's all about the facilities. Elias and Chris put it, that we have the Kasarani Stadium, we have the Nyayo Stadium, but these are all stadiums that cannot host, or it cannot be regarded as one of the best facilities to host a World Championships. It's so shameful that Kenya cannot host in 2025. They may not also host in 2027, and I think Elias has a better knowledge when it comes to this, because at times, if we look at sports tourism, for example, how many people would we have hosted as a country had we have World Championships coming to Kenya? How many hotels, you know, would have been booked? It is immense. But unfortunately, again, you know, this is where the government policies are mixed up. You know, nobody really looks at those guys who look at bigger picture of hosting such kind of events. Now, we have mentioned about also lotteries. I'm aware that at a certain point, NOC wanted to start one. I have no idea what exactly happened because we expected NOC to have a lottery. But again, talking about lottery, we have got so many betting companies. I think this country is one of the lucrative places to host betting companies. Now, my question that I've been asking myself is, they will report billions and billions of profit and all the money that they give out. Now, the question is, why can they be asked to participate in development of sports? Because it is not enough to, for example, when we have a race, for example, a company will come in to just sponsor. But I'm looking forward to a government policy that will say all the betting companies should be able to participate in the development of the sport. And that way, it will be far much better. Last but not least, I would say this: all federations must be involved when it comes to Ministry of Sports and policy making.
Well, thank you very much, Bungei. Gentlemen, I am seeing one trend here. We are blaming the government for literally everything that has happened. The sports betting companies, I think, do contribute taxes to the sports fund. And Lana said very nicely that clubs again have to go and beg for this money from that funding, which means there's a problem with how the funding is being dispersed. We talked earlier on about allocation of funding even to the counties, and it seems that there is a problem with that allocation as well. Before we get into the core of our discussion, which is what the president should do as well, the big question is politics the biggest hindrance to sports in this country? Are you rooting for a complete privatization of how sports is run in this country? Elias, can you decipher that for us?
Yeah, I think politics has a very big role to play in the failure of Kenyan sport. I can tell you for a fact what happens behind the scenes is very, very ugly. We have the parliamentary committee, the previous parliaments. The 13th parliament has just come into force, so we cannot discuss about them. But previous parliaments, you'll find the committee in charge of sport will, be asking for favors. I know for a fact one of the main betting companies in Kenya was hounded out of business because of such demands. They tell you, if you don't give us this, then we'll fight for you to be thrown out of town. And you've been seeing this happening. Very, very many federations go through this. Whenever you have the Olympic Games, you find the committee sending people on benchmarking trips in Tokyo. I was in Tokyo for the Olympics and Paralympic Games, and there were members of parliament and senate who were there, and they hardly left their hotel, but they were there for benchmarking. Because, of course, at that time, there was a COVID issue, and once you landed in Tokyo, you needed 14 days isolation before you can mingle with the rest. They got there and they hardly got out of the hotels. They get their allowances, they twist federations, and that's where the problem is. There's no conducive atmosphere for sports to thrive. Look at the taxation. Again, I'm party to information about people who wanted to help Kenyan sport, bringing in hockey sticks, bringing in artificial turf for hockey, but then they are prohibited by the excessive taxation that then will not allow them to bring in these facilities. So yeah, politics plays a big role in killing Kenyan sport. And that's where the government of His Excellency William Ruto should really dig in and create an environment that will allow, let's have a responsible parliament that will pass legislation that will help sport. They should stop twisting federations, the Olympic Committee, so that they're always on the gravy train. Let them put the sports people ahead of themselves, and that way we'll make some progress.
Mr. Machio, you talked about allocation of funds to the counties as well. Now, the county executives are also political appointees and will dance to the whims of the appointing governor. Will that be a solution? The other thing I needed to elaborate on as well is Makori has touched on, say, people who want to assist Kenyan sport, donating even equipment. A couple of years back, when I say a couple, I mean maybe 15, 20. You would import, you would bring in, let me say, sports equipment duty-free because they were for the development of the sport. But again, a couple of unscrupulous federation chiefs started importing even big machines like cars and saying they were for sport and putting them in duty free, and then they used them locally and probably sold them off as well. Is it really the government that has a problem as well, or are the federations themselves having a problem? Or would you generalize it and say we have a leadership crisis, both within the counties and the federations, that is affecting this problem?
Yeah, Bernard, you have asked a couple of questions. So the first question is about merchandise or equipment. Personally, we were involved. We partnered with an American university that we used to host them here in the country for a while. And one of the things we will ask them to do, because they had sponsorship or deals with Nike, Under Armour, and all that, was just to ask them to see whether the equipment they had used for a season that they were not going to use, so that we can able to do it. And specifically, we were asking them for athletic cleats, because we know athletic spikes were very expensive. And it reached a point where when this team will come in, they will be asked to pay for the donation that they were coming with. So we stopped that program. So I think there need to be a policy where if organizations like us have opportunities to be able to help athletes to be able to get this very expensive stuff, we can be able to channel that. Right now it exists, but it is very, very, very tedious for you to be able to go apply to that. So that is one. The second bit of merchandise is just about getting fake merchandise in the country. That is why the likes of Nike and the rest of other apparel manufacturers don't consider this as a very huge market because there's so many fake merchandise, whether it is Under Armour sponsors Gor Mahia, the replica jerseys that will come in will not actually be from Under Armour. So that is something that the government needs to check on, just having fake stuff. On the counties, I'll give you a very, just as Makori has said, we presented a proposal in one of the counties on talent development, and the figure was coming to a specific amount. The executive actually were with the idea, but when it came to the floor of the house of that particular county, the MCAs actually wanted to say, hey, what is the need for us? So they took the budget that was for development, divided it into themselves in their wards, the same budget, and they wanted to do a tournament because sport is actually a social pillar where they will come and say, oh, we want to engage the youth so that they don't engage in illicit. Basically, that money was withheld to a point where every ward was getting about 45 or 50,000 shillings. So the entire budget that we wanted to do did not go to the meaningful way of what we wanted. So I think that the easiest thing for the government or the president or the cabinet to do is just to shift sport from being a social pillar to becoming an economic block of this country. And then sport will have an independent ministry that will be allocated more resources, whether that resource will be direct from the government or direct coordination with the lottery fund. And then they can be able to engage the private sector, engage the county government. For example, Kinoru Stadium, Buhungu Stadium, Masinde Mlilo Stadium in Bungoma. Bungoma, for instance, they're building a county stadium. What commercial value is that stadium for the county government of Bungoma? We have Nzoia Sugar there as a team that plays in the Premier League. Will it be where we say, this is the home ground, we are building this, we are giving these guys what a private partnership so that they lease this stadium to this Premier League club. Then the Premier League club can start developing commercial value for this, get naming rights for this stadium, get partners to come in so that they can be able to fund themselves and not have to go back to the same county begging for money. For the national volleyball or any indoor games, we only have, and Elias will tell you this, we only have one national indoor arena in this country, which is Kasarani. That is the reason why we have not been able to host any volleyball tournament, I think, for the past 4 or 5 years, because they need two venues for us to be hosting that. So these are some of the things that we need to be able to go. And volleyball has suffered a lot. We have been ranked one of the best in the country, but we don't have anything that we can call our own here.
Well, that is well fronted. You had mentioned earlier on that you would want a situation where the national teams, if they're training, say at the stadium, they know that they have to pay. But I see us also chasing our own tails in this situation where the clubs have no money to pay for the venues, but the venues need money to be able to develop themselves. And it's not forthcoming from the government. And if it does, then accountability becomes an issue. I don't know how we'll get ourselves out of that quagmire of, going round in circles in trying to get ourselves out. Bungei, maybe you have a comment on that as well as we move on. I want us to now go into the solution.
I'm actually. Yeah, sure. I'm just surprised, that almost all of us have had the same experience, listening to Wamalwa, talking about equipment that was supposed to come in. I remember during my time when I was running, a company in Italy, we know that Monto, is only done in Italy. And these guys, they wanted to invest in excess of 50 million Kenya shillings. They just needed around 10 million shillings from county assemblies, then was not even county assemblies, the councillors, whatever you used to call it then, and guys were like, they need their cut. What is there for us? And I'm like, you know what? They are going to put a tartan track, that will be the first one in North Rift then, because Kipchoge Stadium was not done. This is unfortunate thing that is happening. But I think, going to the solutions and talking about politics, Bernard, it has to be, there must be a political will by the politicians that they need to achieve something. That must be very important. It must be very key. Government policies will always have to be done, and if it is done in the correct manner, if it is done with the I would call it the will at heart, okay, that they want to achieve something. I believe that we can be able to make a huge difference, an immense difference in this country. So first and foremost, I am hoping that after this conversation and many other conversations that you, Bernard, and Elias will be able to talk about maybe for the next 6 months as this government has just come in, so that they understand what they need to do in terms of sport. And as I said, and I hate to repeat myself, it is so unfortunate to have a Ministry of Sport being the leanest government in terms of exchequer funding. Why should we be able to do that? Yet we know what sport can be able to do. And I believe that, if you guys will be able to push for such a conversation, I can assure you that things will change with this government if they have the will.
All right, Bungei. We always say that hope springs eternal, but I tell you one thing that you can never put your hopes in is politicians doing what you want them to do, and including just having the goodwill to be able to do something for sports. I think it will take more than just hope. It will take a lot of policies to be able to do that. I want us to move to something that is key to this discussion. Then we come to the solutions. Sports tourism. Now, this was part of this discussion, how to promote this country as a destination for sports tourism. I have to remind you, Bungei, that one of the biggest sponsors of golf in this country is actually an athlete. Moses Tanui, sponsors golf a lot. And I don't know how much of lobbying or conversations you have had with him for athletics as well. Just recently, he sponsored a tournament as well. But let's talk about sports tourism. And we're talking about not having facilities in the country. What will be the attraction then for anyone who wants to come to the country as a sports tourist to come and visit? What will be the attraction? Makori, let's start from there.
Thanks, Bernard. There are a lot of ways that we can benefit from our success, in promoting sports tourism. For the last couple of years, since Eliud Kipchoge, for example, ran the 159, you've seen exhibition halls across the global capitals having, whatever Nike, so we set at the pace of 159, then people are told, can you jump onto the treadmill and see if you can match the speed Eliud was running in Vienna? That in itself is already a big attraction to Kenya. If people could come, go to Kaptagat, have a morning run along the coast where Eliud trains, that already is boosting sports tourism. There are a lot of people who are doing that by the way, Bernard. A lot of people are coming just to see where Eliud trains, what kind of regime, what kind of diet. You're already creating an ecosystem for tourism to thrive in the North Rift. The problem with Kenya, we rely on our traditional sources. We rely on the lions, giraffes, elephants, and the beaches in Mombasa. We are not innovative enough to look at new markets. The North Rift is an amazing market for sports tourism because it has a mixture of both wildlife and the athletes. Because when you go down to Kerio, you go to the Rimoi Game Reserve, it has the biggest population of elephants anywhere. And that's a very big attraction. Rift Valley itself is a good attraction. So you can combine, sports tours. You go to Iten, train with the athletes, live with them, mingle with them. And then on the odd day, you go down to the Rimoi National Reserve and look at the animals. So there's a very easy way to blend sports tourism and sports. Look at golf. We have amazing golf courses in Kenya. Vipingo is one amazing addition. We could have tourists coming and playing a few rounds there. Our airline network is improving because now you can even fly on Jumbo Jet directly from Mombasa to Eldoret. Just takes you 1 hour 45 minutes. It's only 9,000 shillings. So you can imagine the interconnectivity is already building up. So we have a firm foundation. It is just a matter of being creative. Fortunately, we have forward-thinking cabinet secretaries who've come. Alfred Mutua in tourism, Ababu Namamba in sports. If there's that interministerial approach, and also, Alfred is in foreign affairs, and it connects well again with sport because if you look at what we've lost to countries like Romania, Bahrain, Qatar, in terms of athletes changing nationalities, they can also cash in on that to excite these countries to invest in Kenya. Not so much the tourism aspect, but development of sport, which is a point that I really wanted to make. These partnerships. We had, for example, the cabinet secretary for sports at the time, Rashid Echesa, going to Cuba and striking a deal, an exchange program where Cuban boxers and coaches will come to Kenya. And then, we have our athletes and coaches also helping the Cubans in distance running. These kind of partnerships. I was in Bahrain at some point, and the Bahraini Athletics Federation was saying, hey, look here, if you guys are ready, we are ready to help build a stadium in Kapsabet. Stop crying over your athletes, having gone to Bahrain. But what can we do for you? So the goodwill is there. If you have this interministerial approach between ministries of foreign affairs, sports and tourism, I think we'll break new ground.
Well, it's very interesting, Elias, that these offers were coming to you. And
no, I wish I was in a position of authority. By the way, Bernard, what we've seen, what Bungei has seen, there's so many things. Yes, there's so many things. There's so many things that we've seen. I've been in sports journalism now for over 30 years, and what I've seen is what makes me angry because the potential that we have, to develop sports. I can tell you for a fact, the Bahraini government, the Athletics Federation said they're ready. They're ready and willing to put up infrastructure in Kapsabet. Kapsabet because that's where most of the Kenyan athletes who have gone to Bahrain come from, and they have won medals for Bahrain. There's a time when the Qatar national government wanted to build a running track in Eldoret. It didn't take off because of the politics. So there are so many things. We have the goodwill. We have a good name out there. But we lack the capacity in terms of management, those people in authority. And I really hope that under the William Ruto government, things are going to change and we cash in on these partnerships. We had Cuban doctors coming to Kenya, the same trip that CSHS went to. We had Cuban doctors coming,
I agree with you. I agree with you talking about what you're saying. I think probably the new government have a little of you should come up with a little delegation where to prevent this community government with people who are ready to give us a figure and everything else so that they can be able to deal with the content of that as well. I'm still on sports tourism. We focus a lot on athletics and golf, and golf has been an international one as well. But even as a top of a destination, we just not be able to tell the country the top of a destination. You will remember very well that the last time partly because it provided an to play. But even that, some reason, didn't become sustainable. So what else, Machio, do you think we should do then to promote sports tourism in the country? After this, then we come to all the solutions that we need to give the government and the big question of what His Excellency the President and the government should do to promote sports in the country.
Yeah, a lot of it, Elias has already touched on it, and I think one of the biggest things that come out of biggest products, that brands that come out of this country is our athletes, be it in any sport, whether it's cricket, whether it is soccer or athletics. So I think protecting the brands is very, very important. So one of the things that we always have a side conversation, is how do we protect our brands? For example, Elliot, for example, Bungei, because these are the people who sell Kenya out there, and they're the same brands that will bring people in. So when we talk about reward system for retired athletes, from the clips that we saw earlier, people talk about having an investment scheme. So for me, I will propose that the government rewards athletes, and all that rewards will come in phases. So perhaps if you are getting, for example, 1 million shillings, 60% of that money should go into your retirement program, so that we prevent those brands. When somebody comes here to go and run in E10, as Elias correctly put, it's Bungei who is actually leading them and running with them on a leisure run, and being able to go with them on a morning run, because they may not be able to run at the pace. But if we don't take care of our brands, then there will be nowhere to be able to do some of these things. So that is one. The second one is I think post-COVID, we had a very good opportunity as this country, because we hosted 3 very good athletic events. So we had the junior athletics, we had the youth athletics, and then we had the Kipkeino Classic. So that is, I think, a brand that we need to continue investing in, both the government and the private sector. And government also needs to look at, if we are world beaters in marathon, why keep on sending people out rather than inviting guys in? So this last Kipkeino Classics was good, because we had some of the top athletes come in. And if we continue having these top athletes coming in, then they will come along with many others. So they will not just come with athletes, but they will also come with spectators who will be able to extend that. We had the Safari Rally as well. I mean, we have it, I think, for the next 4 years. We need to take advantage of that. And at the same time, look at golf. We have invested well in the golf, so that is something well. You talked about camps, on inviting teams, for example, going to the World Cup, be able to come and camp here. So these are some of the things that we can easily be able to do that. Our stadiums need to have either hall of fames or museums where there's sports education, where people can be able to come and visit. So on a normal day, I can have a reason why I need to go to the stadium in Kapsabet and read about all the famous athletes that have come from there. So that becomes at a fee, because if you visit Old Trafford, there are traffic of people who actually go there from, you have to book for you to get a slot to be able to visit either Old Trafford or Emirates, just to go and read the history and sit where these guys sit, because there's so much football culture in that country that has been entrenched in families, and that is, I think, the biggest thing that we need to be able to. So let's start domestically, then we can be able to invite the international community to fill in whatever is left.
Okay, gentlemen. I would have wanted to also find out whether we have packaged ourselves as a country of sports enough to give ourselves an attractive value for the rest of the world to see the need to come to it. But I think that will come out in what I want us to do at the moment. After Bungei gives us his contribution, I'd like you to play Minister for 2 minutes or for 3 minutes, the Minister for Sport, and tell me exactly what you're doing now to be able to put Kenya back on track for sports. And after that, I would like you to play President for just 3 minutes each and tell me then what are you going to do in order to achieve what we're saying in terms of putting Kenya back into sports and how you should nurture and commercialize sports in Kenya. I, on the other hand, will play the devil's advocate
Every idea that you bring out, I will try to find out why it is not workable in the situation that we are in. Bungei, give us your comment now and then become Minister for Sport for 3 minutes.
Okay, I will be all that, Bernard. But just before I go there, and I think part of my conversation will be a minister, will be the president.
Okay.
Because first and foremost, we talk about sports tourism. Look, we have about 5 athletes going to London. We have got to remember that London Marathon attracts over 50,000 runners. Each one of them, it means for them to participate, they love that sport. I am an advocate of inviting our athletes. If it is possible, if I am the minister today, I should be able to visit every training camp in Kenya, both the Minister for Tourism, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and the Minister for Sports. These athletes can be able to do a lot, Bernard. Let me tell you, if these athletes goes to London, for example, Eliud Kipchoge, instead of him signing autographs by Nike, he has an autograph that is made from the Ministry of Tourism, for example, that will show all the attraction places, that will talk about sports in this country. The same 50,000 people, if you give them postcards, not that everybody will get it, but I believe that if 20 or 30 of them will get, or 100, at least 10% of that will be able to come. Now, imagine the Kenyan athletes that will visit all these other countries. They can be able to achieve a lot. And that is why, if I am the minister today, I've got to start with all the federations, visit every federation, ask themselves, what do we want us to do as a sports ministry? What do we want to achieve after 5 years? Because that is very important. I always believe in when you're given a position, always leave it better than you found. Or number 2, be able to achieve something, have something that you can be accounted for, that during your tenure, you are able to achieve A, B, C, D. This should be very important. This should be a guiding line, for all these guys. Because if you look at athletics and golf, for example, Elias was talking about my friend Moses Tanui, sorry. I'm a golfer, a member of Nandi Bears, and I think both WAMALWA and Elias have visited. It's one of the best places to visit. So when it comes to tourism, sports tourism as well, there's so many facilities that you can be able to visit in Kenya and do something. Now, as the president, my take is this: I should be able to invite the minister only when he has achieved the tour. He should be empowered to go through every part of the country and see what they can be able to do, so that by the time that he meets him, he knows what they are going to achieve. Number 2, he should come out and see that we have an elephant in the house, which is the doping issue, which is going to taint this country. That should be taken very seriously as a country, not only for the athletes themselves. This is something that has been selling our country for so long. Kenya is only known for 2 things: the wildlife, 3 things. The coastline and the athletics. If we are going to kill athletics, I can tell you that the reputation of this country, including myself, will be in the ruins. And this is something that I've really come out very strongly and say, this is something that we cannot allow. All of you guys, you travel out of this country based on the sports. And if we are not going to sort it out, I can tell you, you guys will be pulling your heels, in your own houses.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bungei. I think you've rolled the 2 things of being president and minister into one and tried to bring out a solution. Elias, could you start by just being the minister for sport? I know that he has already placed a call to FIFA. I don't know what the discussion was. I don't know what FIFA told them. But in a situation where the president of the federation is accused of malpractices and has stepped aside, what would you do as a minister to be able to make sure that the leadership is what is wanted before the federation is unbanned? Because those 2 things are linked.
Well, in the likely event that I'm appointed one day sports cabinet secretary, I will, a situation like that calls for dialogue. There's nothing short of dialogue. I believe that FIFA has a listening ear. For example, if you take the football example, dialogue is very, very important because FIFA or the International Federation needs the government needs the International Federation, and they both need the local national association. So dialogue and sitting on the same table instead of flexing muscles, because if you don't sit on the same table, then you won't take some concessions or win here, lose there. I think that will help, and that's where, for example, CS Namwamba is going towards that dialogue. Then again, Bernard, you asked as a CS what I do. First of all, I'd look at building capacity in terms of management. The management of our Kenyan sport is really wanting basic things like event organization. I've been on multitasking. I've been on split screen watching the Standard Chartered Nairobi Marathon, and now the Frankfurt Marathon has just started. I mean, they are worlds apart in terms of organization. The way the Nairobi Marathon is organized is still a total disaster because Standard Chartered Bank wants to run the marathon, from the banking hall instead of, outsourcing proper management for it, to grow and to be better managed. So we need to build the capacity for management of sport in the country. I don't know if you're getting me or the network is.
No, we are getting you very clearly. Yes, we could actually get the Standard Chartered Marathon from your microphone as well before you switched it off. So.
Yeah. I mean, so I was just on split screen looking at Frankfurt and Nairobi and looking at the need to build our capacity and to get to the level of where Frankfurt, London, and other big city marathons are. We have personnel who can run sports in Kenya, who can manage. A good example is in the WRC Safari Rally. We've organized 2 brilliant editions this year, last year, and the government has given guarantees for the event to be running until 2026. So yes, we have men and women who can do the job. They just need to be empowered, given exposure to training, and we are good to go. Then secondly, another most important thing is infrastructure development. We need, the last government promised 5 stadiums, they built none. In my opinion, we need just 3 to start with. One in Eldoret for high altitude, one in Nairobi, the capital of course, and its attractions, and one at sea level in Mombasa. And then we build from there. We'll have a better capacity to organize events, in a better way. And we're also looking at the re-engineering of the sports fund. As it is, the sports fund is not functioning well. It's called the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, but 60% of the fund goes to healthcare, for example, and sports is getting hardly 30%. So it's not serving the purpose it was intended for. I would like to see it re-engineered to give sports more teeth. And again, you're saying the role of the president. If I was head of state, I would have actually gone for a sports ministry, a fully fledged sports ministry. Like Machio said, we need to move from the social element to the economic element. If you look at the global trends, sports is the biggest revenue earner anywhere in the world. Look at Mbappe. If you count down his salary, I was trying to break it down, he earns about 20,000 shillings a second. No white-collar executive in Nairobi can earn close to a quarter of that. So we need to develop sport to be an economic pillar, and it can really bring in a lot of foreign exchange into the country. The athletes going out, the money they bring in, so it can generate revenues for the country apart from helping our young people get a source of income. So in a nutshell, in the interest of time, Bernard, I think that's what is important in my opinion. Infrastructure development, empowering our athletes, also, re-engineering the funding of sports in Kenya and giving sports that economic position that it truly deserves.
And before I even hand it over to Machio, then I would ask you, as the president, would you give that a time frame? Because as you can see, we have a myriad of problems that need to be sorted out that are standing in the way of that success. What time frame would you give it?
I'd like to work on Olympic cycles, a 4-year cycle to break even. I was telling some people the other day that we should not actually, at this point in time, we should not be focusing on the Paris Olympics, for example. We should be focusing on LA 2028. we're already late for Paris, so we need to focus. We should be 4 years ahead. So I'll give it a realistic time frame of 4 years, Bernard.
Thank you very much, Elias. I think Machio is already receiving visitors. I hope it's the ones who are bringing the donor funding. Machio,
we hope it's not the local sports executive who's coming to us.
This is going in the correct way now, Machio. I would want to believe, Machio, that you are in sports marketing, because the other thing that we're saying here is that we don't have people who can market sports good enough to be able to get the funding from the people who should give the funding. Now, the question is, as the sports CS, and I know that with that, because at some point I really would have wanted you to speak about the Magharibi Awards, but this is not the forum for it. I think we'll talk about that on another forum altogether. But events and events management is what Elias talked about. You are in sports marketing and events. Where are we going wrong? As a CS for sports, what do you think we should do now? And then take another 3 minutes to be the president and just give us the mitigation policies or issues that you think should be put in place to sort out our problem at the moment.
Yeah, in terms of marketing, I think it's a broad level, but I will just summarize it in this way. You cannot market an non-existent brand. So as we speak now, the brand sport in this country is very, very at the amateur level. So we need to first package the brand as we are speaking, as Elias is speaking. First, let's package the brand, let's package the product, then we can market it. So I think I will leave it at that. When it comes to infrastructure, I think I'll want to step a step lower as a minister of sport, because this is the only opportunity I'll have to be a minister of sport. So I will step a step lower and say, let's focus on 2028, for example. Let's focus on 2032. And as Elias had correctly put it, one of the biggest exports you can do as a country is to export talent. And when you export talent, the money that is brought into the country, just looking at Wanyama, not even going to the Mbappe level, Wanyama alone brings in what they bring in terms of the revenue. So I will go a step lower and say, let's secure the existing community fields. That is the first way where we can be able to do. So number one is ensure that every primary school in a certain localization has a well-functioning field that the community can use. In this, I can say within the county government, and this is one of the major advocates that we have been doing at Magharibi Michezo Awards, is can we have a soccer field that has been flattened? You don't need actually to do a lot of it. Just use the Ministry of Works in those county governments, flatten a soccer field, flatten a volleyball field, so that they are playable. Then the community can either plant grass in areas where the rain is sufficient, then they can be able to use it, it's playable, then the community can use it. So that is one. Number two, when I was in Egypt recently, I went to development sites. For example, right now, the President Ruto's government is very strong on housing, affordable housing, and affordable housing should come with playing facilities as well. So I visited one housing project where they were having thousands and thousands of houses, but they have got football fields, tennis fields that actually serve that community. And those academies that work there have time schedules. So that field is busy from 8 a.m. in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. So when you look at Egypt in the next 10 years, they will continue having supply of talent, and they'll be able to get this money back. So that is one thing that I will do to be able to do that. The second thing is just education, operationalize the Kenya Academy of Sports, because one of their functions is to educate sports personnel, sports coaches, and the stuff. So that's a no-brainer that we can be able to get an architecture of stuff that we can start working in the next 12 months to be able to build capacity for the coaches and local community coaches. Then the sports council that I talked about is just get all the federations and federation officials together, take them through the government expenditure expectations and policies on how is expected when you receive government money. Let them go through that, let them be taken through it. At the end of the three-day training, we will have a tour, and our tour will be in Kamiti, will be in Langata, will be in industrial area, so that they can be able to know that if you are not able to take care of the government resources that have been allocated to you, this is where you'll end up. And if possible, we will have a special unit there where some of us can spend a night just to see how life there goes, and then we can be able to do that. And then the last one is just getting the private partnership. So have round tables with most top 10 or top 15 corporates that actually invest in sports. They are known in this country, so that we can start developing a common policy together with them. As a president, I think it's just policy framework. So the first policy framework is, as Makori said, ensure that we have a fully fledged sports ministry that has a budget, ensure that we have got tax exemptions from the cabinet. That is something that can be done quickly. And then the framework of those tax exemptions are done. Ensure that we have tax holidays for companies, and that is I think is in place just to enhance it. And then make sure that I'm fully participating, because one of the things that helps a country to move forward in terms of development of infrastructure or the sports itself is just being part and parcel of the family of sports, whether it's attending a local match or whether it is just getting to places, One of the things one person asked me, I think it was in a place, for example, if the president will say he will attend the Gor Mahia derby, I mean, if he rallies people around, that stadium will be full, for sure, and people will pay. And that's basically just what I will do as a president. Be a part and parcel, be a community playing soccer. I mean, just be the community.
Very well said, Machio. I know that Zamalek and Al Ahly have companies that actually do construction. These are the biggest football clubs in Africa. So the players, the bulk of them are actually employed there, even those who have retired from football. And yeah, you're right. The academies then just keep churning out new talent into the market for them. So what I'm hearing as well is that the country in itself, and I mean the politicians, the private sector, the public sector, must also be able to understand the business of sport. Not just to look at sport as a social event, but to understand the business of it and to tap into that. So if I was to go just briefly on what we have touched on in terms of what needs to be done, just the same way as a patient in ICU would need various doses of different medicines to work out for them, we are saying that the Kenyan sports then needs infrastructure building, they need capacity building, they need fully fledged ministries, they need an allocation of resources, packaging our sport to have that commercial value that is needed for it, actually to recognize the value of it itself and then package it. And then the private-public partnerships as well, and tax holidays. That is what I've picked. But as a parting shot, I really would like all of you to comment on something that seems to be a problem as well, but which we always sweep under the carpet. What about the leadership crisis in the federations that are actually mandated to run the sport? This seems to be something that not very many people are talking about, but just recently it came out that literally every federation in the country is having a problem, even those that have had elections. Although we have a Sports Act, which incidentally was mooted by the CS that we now have in sports. The Sports Act is supposed to have mitigated this as well, but we still seem to have people who are unhappy with the leadership. Now, Bungei would tell us, honestly enough, that the athletes are unhappy with the leadership at Athletics Kenya. Let's talk about this crisis. Is it also part of it? As a parting shot, what should be done? We will close it on that note. Bungei, on athletics.
On athletics, first and foremost, I think the sports bill was very clear that, you are supposed to stay there for 4 years, which is renewable only once. If this happened, then I can assure you that it is going to solve all the problems. Number two, and something very important, is that I want to believe that, people should have integrity of resigning if there is a problem. You see, just like our culture in this country, you find somebody has a problem, there is an issue that has happened, no one ever resigns in this country. This is where the problem is. You see, in other countries, even losing a match alone, as a coach, you are out of the coaching team. So that basically should be the norm in this country. And I hope that, with Athletics Kenya, of course, we have a big issue, and Elias will definitely mention it, that we have a court case, which has made elections not to be done in Athletics Kenya. We do not know how long it is going to take. We know the courts, how the situations can take. Again, if that happens, because the team that is inside right now in Athletics Kenya have been there for more than 8 years already. They should have been out. So this is one situation that we have no idea when it is going to end, but that should be the case.
All right, thank you very much, Bungei. That was short and to the point on athletics. The case, there's a court case, and it's challenging the stay of the officials who are in the office at the moment. Elias, on leadership. And I think Bungei actually has touched on something that we call integrity. Just if you think you're not doing well enough, why don't you just leave it to somebody else? The integrity clause as well. Elias.
Yeah, actually, Chapter 6 is very important in sports management, and I must say that we have a good starting point. We have the Sports Act, and now we need all arms of government, the executive, legislature, and judiciary working, playing their role. For example, we need the sports tribunal given more teeth to prosecute and to get these cases pending out. We need Parliament to tweak the Sports Act and make it more up to date, so that people who are found to have embezzled funds, for example, mismanaged, proper action is taken against them. The judiciary needs to fast track the cases in court. Bungei mentions the case of athletics. It's a very simple one that has held up the elections at Athletics Kenya for many years. So if everybody was playing his or her part fluidly, then we'll get the system running. But I must say, it's not all doom and gloom. The Sports Act of 2013 is a perfect start. We just need to do some amendments to give it more teeth and make it more up to date.
Thank you very much, Elias. Machio, can you have the last word on this?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a cultural problem. I think you cannot hold people to account where you don't have values as a community. As long as we're still booking queues at the banking level for me to be able to do something else and come back to the sport that I was, as long as we are still getting into a matatu when it was full, as long as a community we are not respecting traffic rules, just simple things like traffic lights, I think it will be very difficult for us to enforce integrity. So it is something that we just, as Makori has said, look at Chapter 6. What is it that we need? What are the values of the nation? So that it can be espoused even at the leadership level, any federation or any leadership position that you pick up. If you don't ascribe to these values, then the only honorable thing for you to do is step aside.
Well, Macho, I can't let you go away with this. Are you saying the country is hopelessly dishonest? Because you mentioned just different aspects of life where people are not following the rules, From
where I sit, I mean, every single place I turn to, we have got a lot of deception that happens in everything that we do. Whether you are buying those warus at the market and they have a hollow, they have placed very nice warus, and then at the bottom of it, there's nothing. That is dishonest. When you get a matatu guy who tells you 20 bob, and then when you get in, it's 50 bob, I mean, that's the heart of dishonest. In every sector, when you look at it, I think we just need to have a conversation as a country where we hold ourselves to values that we say, these are our values, and this is it that we are going to expose ourselves to.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I borrowed a little time because we started slightly late, but I think we've done what we need to do. WAMALWA MACHIO is the founder of the Magharibi Sports Awards as well, and runs Michezo Africa and a couple of other organizations that are involved in sports. Elias Makori is the managing editor for sports at the Nation Media Group. WILFRED Bungei, captain and seasoned 800 meters Olympic champion, and also a man who's got athletics to his heart. I thank you very much for having participated in this discussion. I think we've nailed it: infrastructure building, capacity building, fully fledged ministry and stadia, allocation of resources, package of sport to have commercial value and economic value, private-public partnerships, and tax holidays would probably help us out. I think we've nailed it, and I'll take you back now to Chris to probably wind it up from there. Chris.
Thank you.
Very, very informative, entertaining panel on how should the President Ruto's administration nurture and commercialize sports in Kenya. with focus on sports tourism. And now I think the world knows a little bit too much more about Kenya than they should. But as I say, at the Kenyan National Sports Film Festival, we deal with everything that is sports and film. And I'd just like to give a disclaimer that all those so-called cabinet secretaries were not vetted. They were self-appointed by BENARD in his capacity as the president of that particular administration. So now you know. I'm now here with the chairman of the Kenya International Sports Film Festival, Mr. Asif Karim. And my first question would be, what would you do as, one, the cabinet secretary for sports, and then two, as the president with this issue?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate and thank the panelists. I think that was a very powerful session, and they could have gone on for another 2-3 hours. And the points that came out were very, very, valuable. And I don't think this should stop here. No. I think the first thing we would need to do is to maybe possibly send this recording to the minister.
Yes.
For him to listen to these experienced people who actually, I felt a lot of good energy, them speaking from their heart. You could see the hurt on how the industry is going. So to answer your question as the CS, I would first walk in, even before being formally appointed,
yes,
I would have a discussion with His Excellency and say that, what are your goals of the sports in this country? And after having discussed that and knowing the history of where we are right now, I would request him for an executive order for him to sign to disband the entire sports in this country. Because traditionally, for the last 15-20 years, some of these conversations that we are having, but today it was stepped up, is the same thing. There is nothing different.
Yes.
It's the same thing that we're recycling. We're trying to do a piecemeal solution. And this piecemeal solution is not going to help. It sounds fine theoretically, but practically the results are not there. And if, of course, if His Excellency would not, or we would not be in agreement, I would honorably say, Your Excellency, I don't think I'm the right person for this. So for me, it would be a non-negotiable without that executive order, because I want to get things sorted once and for all. Because it's very critical to have our governance in place.
Yes.
To me, I've continuously said that position, because when you're bringing in money, you need professionals to run it. Of course, you also need the retired athletes, or you need the current athletes in it, but it's a mix. How can 100 million shillings go through my office when I don't even understand a balance sheet?
That is true.
So some of the things I think we need to really pinch ourselves and be reality. As the president, I would definitely, without even being told, because I'm passionate on sports, I know where the problem is, without even being told, that would be my first executive order, that I'm banning the entire sports in this country. I'm appointing 18 to 24 people that I think will do justice to give them a very clear terms of reference for the next 3 to 6 months, and even inform them, you do not need to reinvent a wheel. You can go to successful sporting nations in this world, pick up a leaf from them, and then tweak as what is required for every sport in this country. And that would be the starting point.
And the day that we have the Standard Chartered Marathon and the day that we have the Frankfurt Marathon, we realize that almost every federation, sporting federation in Kenya is in crisis.
It's a sad thing for us as Kenyans. We should be really upset about what is going on. And you could feel from the panels, there's all hurt there. And I just hope that as a nation, and I liked what Machio said, that every stage there is a rot. And I think the responsibility starts with me as an individual, with each of us as Kenyans as individuals, that we need to change the narrative. We need to change and really take the responsibility as individuals. And as individuals, if we do it, it'll help the family can help the community, and the society in general.
And on the first day of the Kenyan International Sports Film Festival 2020, hybrid edition, that was on Thursday, the 27th of October 2022. That was the same day the new cabinet was being sworn in.
Yes.
So we had a new sports cabinet minister sworn in. Yes. We have a new ICT cabinet secretary sworn in. We also have a new health cabinet secretary sworn in. And we also have a new cabinet secretary for foreign affairs sworn in. And all these things somehow tie into sports.
Absolutely, all interrelated. I mean, it's a 360. As we said, yesterday we heard sports is a 360. It's not one dimension.
Yes.
So I think it's great opportunity we have as a country to turn it around, and I just hope that all of us, individually, collectively, make a difference.
And we also have a new CS, I think, for trade and industry as well. That's all,
well, all of them.
That. Yes,
all
exactly.
the 20 plus.
Exactly. Exactly. So now you know. that is the situation with sports, especially in Kenya, and we're hoping and praying for the very best. Remember, this focus was also on sports tourism. So we do have things like Safari Rally, we have the Rugby Sevens, we have whitewater rafting, we have skydiving, and quite a few other attractions. And we hope that in the future that things like the Kenya International Sportsman Festival will also be able to highlight and bring to the fore these issues that are very, very important, not just in Kenya, but maybe even Africa and the world. Coming up next, we have some very good movies, and then also we have a panel on sports biopics, their importance, here on the Kenya International Sportsman Festival 2022 Hybrid Edition. Come to you live from Aristocrat Studios in Lamington, Nairobi, Kenya, East Africa. Enjoy.